You, upstairs, tonight!
They called her the girl who cleaned the candlesticks. Ottilie Fenmore stood at the edge of the Marrowvale ballroom, holding a tray she wasn't paid enough to hold, watching people laugh in silk she would never touch. Then the room went quiet, because the Duke of Ashgrove, Corvin, the man no woman survived marrying, walked straight past every heiress in that hall, and stopped in front of her. You, he said, upstairs, tonight. The tray hit the floor, and somewhere above them, behind a locked door on the 3rd floor, a dead woman's ring was still sitting on his pillow. Why would a duke choose a servant over a room full of noblewomen? Whose ring was on that pillow, and why did every maid before Ottilie leave that house and never arrive home? What she finds in that bedchamber is worse than what she feared. Please, subscribe to the channel. Don't let this story disappear from your feed. I'm begging you. Hit subscribe. The tray was still ringing on the floor when Ottilie Fenmore remembered how she got there. She was 23 years old, and she had learned a long time ago that the safest thing a poor girl could be was invisible. She was good at it. She knew how to stand in a room so that no one's eyes caught on her. She knew which floorboards in Marrowvale House groaned and which ones kept quiet. She knew the exact weight of a wine tray, the exact angle to hold it so that a gentleman's elbow would never knock it, the exact half-second to step back when a lady swept past, in skirts that cost more than her father's entire debt. She was clever. That was the trouble. Clever girls with empty pockets are never allowed to be anything but useful. Her father had been a gentleman once. Everyone in the village still called him one, the way you keep calling a burned house a home. Corliss Fenmore had owned land, a mill, a name that meant something at the market. Then came a bad harvest, then a worse investment, then the quiet men in dark coats who came to the door and did not knock softly. Now he sat by a cold grate most evenings, with a blanket across his knees and his hands shaking, and he pretended he was reading when the light was too weak to read by. "You are late," he said to her the night before the ball. He did not look up. "I stayed to bank the fires." "You should not be banking anyone's fires." She hung her cloak. She did not answer, because there was nothing to say that they had not already said 100 times. Her sister was 14 and coughing. Marisol Fenmore had their mother's face and none of their mother's luck. The medicine cost 11 shillings a bottle. Ottilie earned 9 shillings a week. That was the whole arithmetic of her life. 9 against 11. She had been losing that sum for 2 years. "Sing something," Marisol said from the bed, her voice thin as paper. "I cannot sing." "You can, you just do not." Ottilie sat on the edge of the mattress and touched her sister's forehead, and it was too warm, and she said nothing about it, because saying it out loud would make it true in a way she could not afford. She did not sing. She sat there in the dark until the girl fell asleep, and then she went to the window and looked out at the black shape of Marrowvale House on the hill, all its windows burning gold, and she hated it, and she needed it, and she did not know any more which feeling was stronger. Marrowvale was the Duke of Ashgrove's country seat, and it was said that the Duke did not like to be looked at. She had served in that house 8 months, and she had seen him 4 times, once on the stairs, once through a doorway, twice at the far end of a hall, walking away from her, tall and dark and silent as a closing door. The other servants told stories about him the way children tell stories about wolves, half frightened, half thrilled. 3 women, Thrussell the butler said once, polishing a glass he had already polished. 3. In 5 years, 1 drowned, 1 fell, 1 simply stopped being in the house one morning, and nobody ever said where she had gone. Perhaps she left, Adeline said. Thrussell looked at her for a long moment with his old grey eyes. Girl, he said, nobody leaves Marrowvale, not through the front door. She had laughed at him then. She was not laughing now. The night of the ball, she was told to serve wine and keep her mouth shut, and she did both perfectly for 2 hours. She watched them dance. She was not envious of the silk, whatever anyone might think. She was envious of the ease, the way those women laughed without first checking whether laughing was allowed, the way they took what they wanted from a tray without saying thank you, because it had never once occurred to them that anything could be refused. Lady Perpetua Glaive found her by the pillars. You are the Fenmore girl. Yes, my lady. Your father was a gentleman. He is still my father. Perpetua smiled the way a knife smiles. How brave! Tell me, do you find it very difficult standing here, watching a life you were nearly born into? Adeline kept her eyes down and her voice level, because pride was a luxury and she had already sold everything else. I find the wine heavy, my lady, nothing more. Perpetua laughed, delighted, and moved away, and Adeline stood there, with her jaw aching from how hard she was holding it shut. She should have known then. Something in the room had already turned. The music kept playing, but the air had gone thin, the way it does before a storm arrives and everyone pretends not to feel it. She felt eyes on her, not curious eyes, not cruel ones either, hunting ones. She looked up, and across that enormous glittering room, past the heiresses and the diamonds and the fathers weighing daughters like grain, Corvin, Duke of Ashgrove, was watching her. He was not smiling, he was not moving. He was looking at her the way a man looks at a door he has finally decided to open. Then the music stopped. Then he crossed the floor. Then the tray hit the ground. And every face in that room turned. And Adeline Fenmore stopped being invisible forever. Upstairs, he had said. Tonight. And now, standing among the broken glass with wine soaking into her only pair of shoes, she understood that she was not being asked. She looked at his face for the first time properly, close, and what she saw there was not desire. It was fear. The Duke of Ashgrove was afraid of something, and for reasons she could not begin to understand, he had chosen her to carry it. Please, he said, very quietly, so only she could hear, do not scream when you see it. The whole ballroom was watching, and nobody moved to help her. Adeline knelt down and began picking up the glass. It was the only thing she could think to do with her hands. A shard opened her thumb, and she watched the blood come without feeling it, and above her the silence stretched so long that somebody laughed, high and nervous, and then stopped. Leave it, Corvin said. It is my mess, your grace. It is my floor. She looked up at him. Close. He was not what the stories said. He was younger. He was tired, in a way that no amount of sleep would ever fix. His hands were steady, but his jaw was not, and there was a muscle jumping there that he could not command. Stand up, he said. She stood. Lady Perpetua Glaive stepped forward with her fan half open, smiling like a woman who had waited all evening for exactly this. Your Grace, she said sweetly, you cannot possibly mean to take a serving girl upstairs in front of half the county. I mean exactly that. Then say it plainly, so we may all understand the sort of house this is. The room leaned in. Adeline felt every eye like a hand on her skin. She thought of her father by the cold grate. She thought of Marisol coughing into a pillow. She thought with a strange, faraway clarity that whatever happened in the next minute would follow her until she died. Corvin turned to face the room. Miss Fenmore is leaving my service tonight, he said. Somebody gasped. Perpetua's smile widened. She is entering my household in another capacity, he went on. Under contract, witnessed, paid. The gasp turned into a noise Adeline had never heard a room make before, a low, ugly rush of delight, because there is nothing the well-fed love more than watching the hungry get ruined. That is a filthy thing to say aloud. Perpetua breathed, thrilled. Then you should not have made me say it. He took Adeline by the wrist, not hard, but not gently either. He walked her out of that room through a corridor of faces, and she kept her chin up, because it was the only thing left that belonged to her. The study door shut. The noise stopped. She pulled her wrist free and stepped back until the desk was between them. "Say what you want," she said. "Say it fast, and then let me go home." "I cannot let you go home. I did not ask permission." He almost smiled. It did not reach anything. "Sit down, Miss Fenmore." "I will stand." Corvin went to the window and stood with his back to her, and for a while he said nothing at all, and the fire snapped, and her thumb bled quietly onto her apron. "Your sister is ill," he said. "Her whole body went cold." "How do you know that?" "Because I have been finding out everything about you for 11 days. He turned around. "Her medicine costs 11 shillings. You earn 9. Your father owes 42 pounds to a man in Hollowfield who has already sold that debt twice. In 3 weeks he will lose the house. In 4, your sister will not have the medicine at all." She could not breathe properly. She hated him more in that moment than she had ever hated anyone. "You looked into us." "Yes." "Like an account book." "Yes." "Why?" He crossed to the desk and set down a paper, and she did not touch it, and she did not look at it, and she made herself keep looking at him instead. "Because I need someone in a room upstairs," he said, "and it cannot be a servant, and it cannot be a wife, and it cannot be anyone who will be believed. And a ruined girl will not be believed." "No," he said quietly, "she will not. That is exactly why it must be you." The honesty of it was worse than a lie. Something in her chest cracked open, and she was furious to find that it hurt. "Say it plainly," she said. "You want me to share your bed? I want you to sleep in that room. What happens in it is your choice, and no one else's, and I will not ask you for a single thing you do not offer freely. And if you never offer, then you never offer, and it changes nothing about the money." She stared at him. "Then what do you want?" "I want you to see something," he said, "and I want you to be the only living person besides me who has seen it. And I want the whole county to believe you are only my whore, so that nobody ever asks you what you saw." The fire cracked. She heard her own heartbeat. £600, he said, "paid the moment you agree. Your father's debt cleared. Your sister sent to a doctor in the city, not a village apothecary. A house in your name, not his, so that no man can gamble it away again. £600. She could not even picture the shape of that number. "And in return I lose my name." "You lost your name when your father lost his money," Corvin said. "I am simply the first person to offer you anything for it." She hit him. Her hand simply went, and it landed, and the sound of it was enormous in that quiet room. He did not touch his face. He did not raise his voice. He just looked at her, and there was something almost like relief in it, as though he had been waiting to be struck by somebody for a very long time. "Good," he said. "You will need that." Adeline stood there shaking, with her palm stinging, and her thumb bleeding, and her whole life balanced on the edge of a desk. She thought of Marisol's forehead under her hand. Too warm. Always too warm now. 9 against 11. She reached out and took the pen. "If you touch me without asking," she said, "I will not scream. I will put a knife in you while you sleep, and I will go to the magistrate myself, and I will tell them everything I have seen, and I will not care what happens to me after." "I know," he said. "That is the other reason I chose you." She signed her name. He took the paper, folded it, and put it in his coat, and then he stood very still, and she watched the fear come back into his face like water rising in a well. "Now come upstairs," he said, Now? It cannot wait until morning. It has already waited 3 days. He picked up a candle. His hand was not steady anymore. At the door he stopped without turning around. "When we go in," he said, "do not touch anything. Do not go near the bed. And whatever you see on that pillow, Miss Fenmore, do not say her name out loud." The stairs went up, and the candle made everything worse. Adeline followed him because there was nothing else left to do. 600 pounds sat in her chest like a swallowed stone. She kept thinking absurdly of the tray, of how she had been holding a tray 40 minutes ago, and now she was walking to a locked door on the 3rd floor of a house where women disappeared. The corridor was cold, not the ordinary cold of a big house at night, something worse, something that had been shut in. Corvin stopped at the door and put his hand flat against it, and stood there so long she thought he had forgotten her. "Your Grace, do not use my title in this room," he said. "Not in here." He unlocked it. The smell hit her first, and she understood then exactly what 3 days meant, and she put her hand over her mouth and did not scream, because he had asked her not to, and because some cold, clear part of her had already decided that screaming would make her useless. The bed was made. That was the thing that broke her. The bed was neatly made, the pillow smoothed, and lying on the pillow, exactly in the center, was a woman's ring. And beside the bed, in a chair, sitting upright with her hands folded in her lap like a guest waiting to be received, was the body. She was small. She had dark hair. She was wearing a traveling coat, buttoned to the throat, as though she had come a long way and had not yet been invited to take it off. "Who is she?" Adeline whispered. "Do not say her name." "I do not know her name." "Good," Corvin said. "Keep it that way as long as you can." Adeline made herself look. Her hands were shaking, and she pressed them flat against her skirt to stop it. There was no blood. There was no wound she could see. There was no violence in the room at all, and somehow that was the most frightening thing about it, because a violent room can be explained, and this one could not. "You did not do this," she said. He looked at her sharply. "Why do you say that?" "Because a man who killed her would have moved her. You have not moved her. You have not even taken the ring." She swallowed. "You have been coming in here for 3 days, and standing exactly where you are standing now, and doing nothing, because you do not know what to do." The silence afterwards was terrible. "How old are you?" he said. 23. "You are the first person in 5 years to look at me and not decide what I am before I opened my mouth." "I have not decided anything yet," she said. "Give me time." They went downstairs, and he locked the door behind them, and he poured 2 glasses of brandy and pushed one across the desk to her, and she drank it in one swallow, and it burned all the way down, and she was glad. "The rules," he said. "Say them. You live here. You have that room at the end of the west corridor, not the one upstairs, and it locks from the inside, and I do not have the key. You appear with me in public when I ask. You let them believe what they are going to believe anyway. And you say nothing about what is behind that door to any living soul, not to your father, not to your sister, not to a priest, not to me in front of servants. For how long? Until I know who put her there. You do not know." "No," he said. "I came back from Hollowfield, and she was already sitting in that chair, and the door was locked from the outside, and my key was in my pocket." Adeline set the glass down very slowly. "Then someone in this house wants you hanged." "Yes," Corvin said. "And now they know I have brought you into it, which means from tonight they want you hanged as well." She should have run. She thought about it. She stood in that study with the taste of brandy in her mouth, and thought about the road home and the cold grate, and Marisol coughing. And she did not run. She would think about that for the rest of her life. That she had a moment where she could have gone, and she stayed. The first public appearance was 4 days later. He sent up a dress the color of deep water, and she put it on, and hated how well it fit, because it meant someone had measured her while she slept, or worse, that he had simply looked at her once and known. At the bottom of the stairs he offered his arm. "Smile," he murmured. "I do not smile on command." "Then look bored. Bored is better than frightened." The Hallamere assembly rooms were full, and every head turned, and the noise dropped by half, and Adeline walked in on the arm of the Duke of Ashgrove, in a gown that cost more than her father's house, and she felt the whole county decide what she was in the space of a breath. Lady Perpetua Glaive came straight at them like a ship under full sail. "Miss Fenmore, how well you look! One would hardly know." "Know what, my lady?" "Where you were standing a week ago." Adeline felt Corvin's arm go rigid under her hand, and before he could speak she smiled, slow and pleasant, and said, "I was standing behind you, my lady. You asked me twice for wine and never once looked at my face. It is a strange thing, is it not, to be so certain of a person you have never actually seen?" Perpetua's fan stopped moving. "You have a mouth." "I have had one all along. Nobody thought to ask about it." She walked on. She did not look back. Her heart was going like a hammer, and her hands were freezing, and she wanted to be sick. And Corvin bent his head slightly toward her and said, so quietly that only she heard it, "That was cruel." "Yes, I liked it." "Yes," she said. "That is the part that worries me. They danced because they had to." He was a poor dancer, which surprised her. He counted under his breath. She caught him doing it and looked up, and he saw her catch him, and something in his face broke open for half a second, and he laughed. Just once, low, startled, like a man who had forgotten he could. "You count," she said. "I have always counted. My mother made me learn in a corridor with a book on my head, and I have never once enjoyed a single minute of it. You are the Duke of Ashgrove. You could refuse to dance. And then they would only talk about why. They talk about you anyway." "Yes," he said. "But when I dance, they talk about my feet, and when I do not, they talk about my dead wife." She missed the step. He caught her. They stood there for a moment with the music going on around them and his hand at her back and neither of them moving, and she was suddenly, horribly aware that she could feel him breathing. "You should not have told me that," she said. "No," Corvin said, "I should not." That night she could not sleep. She sat on the edge of the enormous bed in the room at the end of the west corridor, with the key in the lock on her side, exactly as he had promised, and she thought about the way he had laughed. She thought about the woman in the chair with her coat still buttoned. She thought about a man standing outside a locked door for 3 days, unable to go in and unable to walk away. She thought, with a kind of horror, that she had begun to feel sorry for him. Sorry was dangerous. Sorry was the first step on a road she could not afford. Downstairs, very faintly, she heard a door close. She got up. She should not have. She took a candle and went out into the corridor in her bare feet, and the house was black and enormous around her. And she went to the top of the stairs and looked down, and there was a light moving in the hall below. Not a servant's light, too slow. It stopped outside the study, and then a voice she knew, a voice she had heard polishing glasses and telling stories about wolves, said very softly to someone she could not see, "She has been in the room. He took her up on the first night. It is done." And another voice, a woman's, answered, "Then we move sooner than planned." Adeline stood frozen on the stairs with the candle shaking in her hand, and she understood 2 things at once. She was not the first girl they had watched, and whoever had put that body in the chair was still inside the house. She did not go back to her room. She stood on those stairs until the light below moved away, and then she counted to 200, and then she went down in her bare feet with the cold biting her ankles, and she did not know what she was going to do until she was already doing it. She went to the study door and put her hand on the wood, and it was still warm from a lamp that had just left it. Nobody was inside. But the drawer of the desk was open half an inch, and Adeline stood there a long time before she pushed it shut with one finger, because if she opened it, she would never be able to say she had not. In the morning she watched Thrussell pour coffee with his old grey steady hands, and she smiled at him, and he smiled back, and she thought, I know what you are, and you do not know that I know, and that is the only thing I own. The gossip started that week, and it moved like fire in dry grass. They said she had been bought. They said she had bought her way in. They said the Duke had been seen with a servant on his arm at Hallowmere, and that a man who buries wives so quickly should not be trusted with a girl nobody would miss. A woman spat at her feet outside the church in Hollowfield. A boy threw a stone at the carriage and it cracked the window, and Corvin did not even flinch. He simply reached across and pulled the curtain shut on her side, not his. You are used to this, she said. I have had 5 years of practice. Does it stop hurting? He looked out the window for a long moment. No, he said. You simply stop showing them where it lands. She had not expected honesty. She kept not expecting it, and he kept giving it, and it was ruining her. She began to know him in the small ways that are impossible to unknow. He read at night with his boots off and his feet on the fender, and he read fast, and he argued with the book out loud when he thought nobody could hear him. He could not carry a tune. He gave money to a farmer whose barn had burned, and told the man it was a loan, and then never collected it, and forbade Thrussell to enter it in the ledger. He hated being touched without warning. She learned that by accident, brushing his sleeve in a doorway, and watched him go rigid as a struck post. Someone hurt you, she said. Everyone is hurt. That is not an answer. No, he agreed. It is not. And he did not touch her. Not once. Not in a corridor. Not in a carriage. Not in a locked room in the middle of the night. He asked her opinion on the tenants' rents, and he listened to the answer, and then he changed the rents. He asked her what she thought of the men who came to dine, and she told him the truth, that Sir Aldous Vane laughed a half-second too late at every joke, like a man translating, and Corvin went very still and said, Yes, I have thought that for 2 years, and never said it to anyone. They talked until the fire went out. That was the thing that frightened her most, not the body upstairs, the talking. What did you want? She asked him once, before all this. To be a surgeon. She laughed, before she could stop herself. You are laughing at me. I am laughing because that is the only thing you have ever told me that surprised me. She pulled her feet up under her in the chair. Why a surgeon? Because when I was 9, I watched my brother die of a thing a good surgeon could have fixed in 10 minutes, and everyone in the room was too well bred to touch him. He turned the glass in his hand, and then he died, and I became the heir, and they told me a duke does not put his hands in blood, so you put them in ledgers instead. So I put them in ledgers instead. She looked at him, and she thought, you would have been good at it. And she did not say it, because saying kind things to him was becoming a habit she could not pay for. He said, And you, what did you want? Nothing, she said. Wanting is expensive. That is the most frightened thing you have ever said to me. Then you have not been listening. He leaned forward. The firelight moved on his face. Adeline, he said, and it was the first time he had used her name, and something in her chest went sideways. What did you want? And she heard herself say, I wanted to be a person somebody would look for. The silence after it was enormous. She stood up so fast the chair scraped. It is late. Sit down. No, please. She stopped in the doorway with her back to him and her hand on the frame, and she was crying, and she was furious about it, and she would not turn around and let him see. You are not nobody, he said quietly. You have never once been nobody. You were the only thing I looked at in that ballroom, and I had been looking for 11 days. She left. She ran up the stairs and shut her door and locked it and put her back against it and slid down until she was sitting on the floor, and she pressed both hands over her mouth so that the house would not hear her. The dinner was Perpetua's idea. Adeline understood that the moment she walked in. 20 at the table. Sir Aldous Vane on her left, laughing his half-second too late. Perpetua Glaive directly opposite, radiant, patient, waiting. She waited until the fish. "Miss Fenmore," she said, "you must settle an argument for us." "If I can." We were discussing the late Duchess. Perpetua's eyes did not move. Her name was Isolde. Did you know that? Isolde Ravenmore. Such a beautiful name. Has His Grace ever spoken it in your hearing? The room went quiet. Adeline felt the blood leave her face, and she knew everyone saw it. She saw Corvin's hand close hard around the stem of his glass. "No," she said. "How strange. A man who never says his wife's name." "Perhaps," Adeline said, "he says it when he is alone. Perhaps that is the only place a man is allowed to grieve without 20 people watching to see whether he does it correctly." Somebody down the table set a fork down very softly. "You defend him." "I am eating his fish, my lady. It seems the least I can do." A laugh broke out, startled, and Perpetua smiled with her mouth and not her eyes, and said sweetly, "You are very quick for a girl who was carrying a tray a month ago." And Corvin said, from the head of the table, in a voice that was not loud at all, "Say one more word to her, and you will not see the inside of this house again, nor any house within 40 miles of it, and I will make certain of it before the week is out." Nobody breathed. Perpetua's fan stopped. She held his stare for 3 long seconds. Then she laughed, light and easy, and said, "Goodness, how gallant," and turned to Sir Aldous, and the table began to talk again, the way a river closes over a stone. But Adeline had seen it. In the moment before Perpetua looked away, she had glanced down the table at Thrussell, standing by the sideboard, and Thrussell had shaken his head. Once, very slightly, not a servant taking an order, a man giving one. Afterwards, she found Corvin alone in the dark of the long gallery, with his forehead against the cold window. "You should not have done that," she said. "Now they will only say it louder." "I do not care." "You do care. You have cared for 5 years. He turned around. "I did not care tonight," he said. "That is what frightens me." She should have gone. She knew exactly how far away she was standing, and exactly how far she would have to move. "Corvin," she said. He closed his eyes when she said it, as though the name hurt. "Do not," he said. "Do not be kind to me. I have a contract in my pocket that says I bought you, and I cannot look at it any more, and I cannot burn it either, because the moment I burn it, you have no reason to stay in this house, and every reason to run. I am not staying because of the money." "Do not say that. I am not staying because of the money," she said again, and she stepped forward, and he did not step back. They were close enough now that she could feel the cold coming off his coat and the warmth underneath it. His hand came up. It stopped an inch from her face and hung there, shaking. "Ask me," she whispered. "Adeline, ask me." And he said very low, "May I?" And behind them, down at the far end of the gallery, a floorboard groaned. They both turned. The door to the 3rd-floor stairs was standing open. She had locked it herself at 6 o'clock. She remembered doing it. She remembered the sound. Corvin's hand closed hard around hers, and he pulled her behind him, and his voice, when it came, was not a duke's voice at all. "Somebody is upstairs," he said, "in the room." And from far above them, in the dark, in a house where every door had been locked, They heard the unmistakable sound of a woman singing. They went up together, and the singing stopped when they reached the landing. The door to the room was open. The chair was empty. The body was gone. Corvin stood in the doorway and did not move and did not speak. The bed was still made. The pillow was still smooth. The ring was gone too. They took her, Ottoline said. They took her, and they left the door open so we would see. Why? Because now there is nothing to find. Her voice was shaking and she could not stop it. Because a man who says there was a body and cannot produce one is a madman. And a man who is proved to have hidden one is a murderer. They have given you both and taken your choice away. He put his hand flat against the wall, as though the house had moved under him. Somebody wanted me to know they can walk through my locked doors, he said. That is what this is. That is all this is. The magistrate came on Thursday. He came with 2 men and a warrant, and Perpetua Glave's name written on the complaint in a clean, careful hand, and he stood in the hall of Marrowvale and said that a woman had come to this house on the 9th and had not been seen since, and that there were witnesses. What witnesses? Corvin said. Your own butler, your grace. Ottoline looked at Thrussell, and Thrussell looked back at her with his kind old grey eyes, and said quietly, sorrowfully, like a man performing a duty that broke his heart, I saw his grace carry a woman up the 3rd floor stairs on the night of the 9th, sir. And I saw him take the Fenmore girl up after. The floor went out from under her. They searched the house for 6 hours and found nothing. Of course they found nothing. And when they left, the magistrate looked at Ottoline for a long moment on the steps and said, not unkindly, Girl, if you know something, you may still say it. You are not the one they will hang. That night Corvin did not come to the study. She found him in the empty room upstairs, sitting in the chair, the dead woman's chair. He had not lit a candle. You should not sit there, she said. It is the only honest seat in this house. She stood in the doorway. They will take you, she said. Not today, but they will. Yes. Then fight. With what? He looked up, and his face was gray. There is no body. There is no name. There is a butler with 30 years of service, and a woman with a title, and there is you. He said it very softly. There is you, Ottoline. And when they put you in that room and ask you what you saw, whatever you tell them will hang one of us. If you say there was a body, you hang me. If you say there was not, you are the whore who lied for the man who bought her, and you will never work, never marry, never be believed about anything again as long as you live. Then I will lie. No, I will lie for you. No, he said, and stood up so fast the chair scraped. And that is exactly why this ends now. She stared at him. You are going to send me away. I am going to pay you what I promised, and put you in a carriage tonight. Do not do this. Look at what I have made you. His voice broke, and she had never heard it break before, and it was worse than shouting. You would ruin yourself for me, and you would call it choosing, and you would not even know the difference, because I gave you £600 and a locked door, and you have been living inside my walls for 5 weeks, with nowhere else on this earth to go. You cannot want me, Ottoline. You have never once been free enough to want anything. That is the cruelest thing anyone has ever said to me. I know, he said. It is also true, and I would rather be cruel than be one more man who took something from you. She was crying. She did not care. Ask me, she said. You asked me once in the gallery. Ask me again. He looked at her for a long time. His hand did not come up. No, he said. The carriage left at midnight. She did not look back at the house, because she could not. And she held the money on her lap, and it weighed nothing at all. And 8 miles down the Hollowfield road, the carriage stopped in the dark. She heard the driver step down, she heard him walk away, and then the door opened, and it was not the driver at all, and Lady Perpetua Glaive stood in the rain with a lamp in her hand, and said, "Get out, Miss Fenmore. There is something you need to see before he hangs." She got out into the rain because there was nothing left to lose. Perpetua walked ahead of her with the lamp, and did not speak until they reached a low stone building at the edge of the churchyard, and then she unlocked it and stood back. "Go in." "You want him hanged. I wanted him ruined," Perpetua said. "There is a difference, and I have only just discovered it, and I am not enjoying the discovery." The room inside was cold, and there was a table, and on the table, under a sheet, was the woman from the chair. Adeline pulled the sheet back with her hands shaking, and looked at the small, dark-haired woman, with her coat still buttoned to the throat. "She is not Isolde Ravenmore," Perpetua said. "Isolde Ravenmore has been in the ground 5 years, and I helped carry her flowers. This woman is Rena Calloway. She was my maid for 11 years. And 9 days ago I sent her to Marrowvale to find proof that Corvin killed his wife, because I have hated that man since the day they buried her, and I was certain, and I was wrong." Adeline could not speak. She wrote nothing down. She had orders not to. Perpetua's voice did not shake, but her hand did. "She went into that house alive, and she came out of it in a cart, and I did not put her in that chair, and I did not send Thrussell to the magistrate, and I have spent 3 days finding out who did." "Say it, Thrussell Vane," Perpetua said. "Half-brother to Sir Aldous. If Corvin hangs without an heir, the estate does not go to the crown. It goes sideways. It goes to a cousin who has been quietly paying a butler for 6 years, and who laughs half a second too late at every joke, because he is always calculating." Adeline put her hand on the cold edge of the table to keep standing. "Rena found something. Rena found the thing that proves Isolde Ravenmore did not fall," Perpetua said. "And Thrussell found Rena. And now Thrussell is alone in that house with a man he intends to see hanged by Friday." Adeline was already running. She did not remember the ride. She remembered the door of Marrowvale standing open in the rain, and no candle burning anywhere, and her own voice screaming his name into the black hall. She found him on the 3rd-floor landing with his back against the wall, and Thrussell in front of him, and the old man had a pistol, and he was crying, which was somehow the most horrible part. "Sit down, Your Grace," Thrussell was saying. "Sit down and write it, and it will be quick. A confession and a rope is a cleaner death than what Aldous will do to you." "Thrussell," Adeline said. He turned, and Corvin moved. It was not a duke's movement. It was the movement of a 9-year-old boy who had watched his brother die because nobody in the room would put their hands in blood. He went in low and fast, and he took the pistol high, and the shot went into the ceiling, and the plaster came down like snow, and then the two of them were on the floor, and Adeline was on Thrussell's arm with her whole weight, and the pistol slid away across the boards, and it was over. The magistrate came back at dawn. Perpetua Glaive stood in that hall in her ruined silk, and told the truth in a clear voice in front of 9 witnesses, and it cost her everything she had, and she did it anyway. Aldous Vane was taken in Hollowfield on the Sunday, and then the house was quiet, and the two of them were standing in the long gallery again, and neither of them knew how to begin. "You sent me away," she said. "Yes." "You were wrong." "Yes." "Say why." Corvin looked at her, and there was nothing left on his face. No title, no mask, no 5 years of practice. "Because I was afraid," he said. "Because I told myself I was being noble, and I was being a coward, and I dressed it up as protecting you, so that I would not have to stand here and say the true thing." "Say the true thing." "I love you." The rain went on against the windows. "I loved you before I ever spoke to you," he said. "I watched you for 11 days, and I told myself I was choosing someone useful, someone nobody would believe, and I was lying to myself with every word. I chose you because you were the only person in that house who moved through the world like it had already hurt her, and she had decided to keep going anyway. And then you sat in my study with your feet under you and argued with me about rents, and you told the truth to Perpetua Glaive at my own table with 20 people listening, and I have not had a single honest hour since. You bought me. I know. You will always have bought me. That does not go away, because you say a kind thing in a corridor. I know that too, he said, so I am not going to ask you to forget it. I am going to burn the contract in front of you and give you the money, whether you stay or go, and the house in your sister's name, whether you stay or go, and then I am going to stand here with nothing to offer you but myself, which is the smallest thing I own, and I am going to ask you anyway. Ask me, Adeline Fenmore. His voice was not steady. May I? And she crossed the gallery and took his face in both hands and said, yes. He kissed her like a man surfacing. They burned the contract that night. She watched it curl, and she felt nothing but a great tiredness, and then, underneath it, something so unfamiliar, it took her an hour to name. She had been looked for, somebody had looked for her, and found her, and stayed. They married in April in a small church in Hollowfield with 11 people present, and half the county called it a scandal and the other half came anyway. Marisol walked in front of her sister and did not cough once, and she was pink and loud and 13 inches taller than she had been in November, and she had opinions now, which the doctor in the city said was a sign of health. Corliss Fenmore gave his daughter away with his hands steady for the first time in 3 years. Perpetua Glaive came. Nobody had invited her, and everybody knew she would come, and she sat at the back in gray and cried without making a single sound, and afterwards Adeline walked out to her and took her hand and said, "Thank you for Rena," and Perpetua said, "Do not," and then held on far longer than she meant to. There were years after that. There was a small hospital in Hollowfield that a duke paid for and, more scandalously, worked in, with his sleeves rolled and his hands in blood, and the county talked about it for 2 seasons, and then got used to it, the way people always do. There was a son with his father's silence and his mother's mouth, and a daughter who counted under her breath when she danced, and Adeline caught her at it once and had to leave the room. And there were nights, long after, when the fire was low and the house was warm, and Corvin would look up from a book he was arguing with and find her watching him. "What?" he would say. "Nothing. You are thinking something." "I am thinking," she said once, "that none of it was real. The dress was a costume. The dinners were a performance. Every word we said in front of those people was a lie we agreed on in advance." And she put her feet up on the fender beside his. "And the only true thing in that whole house," Adeline said, "was the way you looked at me when nobody was watching. That was never acting. You were just too frightened to call it by its name." Corvin closed the book. "And you?" "I was carrying a tray," she said. "I did not know I was allowed to want anything." He reached over and took her hand, and did not let go, and outside the wind moved through Marrowvale, and found nothing left in it that was afraid. That is the end of Adeline and Corvin, but the woman in gray at the back of that church, the one who ruined herself to save a man she hated, went home alone that night to an empty house, with a debt she can never repay, and a maid she can never bring back. Perpetua Glaive's story is not finished. Would you like me to tell it? If this story kept you up, subscribe now, and tell me in the comments who you want next. I am not done with this county, and neither are you.